of the different formats we have to engage with us via office hours. There's this current series that occurs on Wednesdays from 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific time to be able to join in with any questions, anything that you want to dive into. We also have on the second Wednesday monthly a session for individuals in the APAC region from 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. And then we have development hours that are really focused on if you're looking to collaborate and help with items for Python and Java as well. So just a quick reminder on that. I want to go ahead and turn it over to Catherine, who's joined us. She has a bit of content to cover and some feedback for that she'd like to collect from all of you. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing and let her introduce herself. Catherine, do you want to take it away?
And Catherine, you're muted if you're speaking. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Hope you can all hear me and hope you can see the shared content here. So I'm a product manager in the Azure Cache for Redis team. Today, I'll do a few scenario demos on using Redis with Semantic Kernel to build chat apps. We wish to get your feedback on some of the new ideas. So here is the agenda for today. Firstly, a little bit introduction on Redis Enterprise. This is like an enterprise version of Redis, different from the open source version. We have a contract with the Redis Inc., which is the company who maintains this enterprise version of Redis. We offer it as the first-party service in Azure. And it comes with the Redis search module, which enables vector similarity search and makes Redis Enterprise one of the options for building your intelligent applications. So it has built-in search algorithms. It supports storing the data in the vector embeddings format, and it has integrations with Semantic Kernel and a few other well-maintained community libraries. So we have the possibility to build even more features into Semantic Kernel on top of the existing developer experience. So let's see a demo on the chat application. So I'm using Redis as the semantic text memory to store chat history and user preferences. So let's just run this application. It's doing some initialization to transfer a blog post into vector embeddings right now, so it might be a little bit slow to start. Okay, so you see, firstly, it asks me to enter a username. So I'll just say Kathy. At this point, it goes into the Redis instance behind it to fetch for some user preferences on the chat style. So for example, if I ask it to tell me a joke now. So notice how the response kind of rhymes is in the format of a poem, and that's because I saved the user preference in the Redis cache associated with the user. So Redis cache is supports the key value type of data structure and saving user preferences, or after like we have more complicated learning on what's the user's response style, generating something on behalf of the user could be one of the scenarios where you want something like a Redis cache behind your chat application. And like many of the built-in semantic text memory stores, Redis is also one of the choice. So suppose if you are already using it for saving a user preference, and now you ask it like, tell me more about the F# FS 0010 error. So it will go into a the Redis backend Redis instance to search through a blog that's transformed into the vector embedding format to get the information. Just give me 1 minute here. So loading. So this tool is Redis Insight. It's a GUI management tool. You can see here. This is basically how everything can be broken down. In this case, into paragraphs and saved in Redis for vector similarity search. So we have the metadata that contains text, and then the embeddings in the vector embedding format to perform the search. And you'll see like earlier when I was entering my username, it has the user chat preference associated with it, saying as a chat assistant, you should talk in a poetic style. So that's how I got it to chat in a specific style format. Now, what's more? So suppose if I host everything in a server, and if there was a server failover scenario, say everything's killed. Traditionally, if we store everything in memory, like for example, the chat history part, if I start it again, it would not get the context from the previous conversation because if the server fails, everything in memory is wiped out. And probably your request could be served by another application server hosting your code. So in this case, you really want to make the in-memory part of chat history to be externalized in a store like Redis cache. So now, if I ask it like why the joke was funny, because I saved the previous context in the chat history in Redis, it has some context related to the previous conversation. And you see, like, instead of saying, sorry, I don't know what you're asking about, it does explain why the joke was funny in the context of the previous joke it was telling me. And what's more interesting about the chat history, so it can improve the consistency of the responses too. Let's say, ask it another question, where is the French capital city? Okay, it's in the poetic style, but it tells me some responses. And now if I ask a similar question with the same meaning, let's say, where is the capital city of France? So notice the two responses are the same because I attached the previous chat history with my chat prompt. So it would go search for what was the chat history first to get some context. And then with this type of context, hit the backend OpenAI GPT deployment to generate another response, but with the previous context. So in this case, because the questions have very similar meanings, like where is the capital city of France, versus like where is the French capital city, it understands like semantically these are similar, and it will be able to reuse some of the context from previous response generated. So in this chat application, I'm using Redis for saving the semantic text memory on additional knowledge that GPT would not know about. We experimented with using Redis to save the chat history to maintain the relevance throughout the conversation. And we were using Redis for saving the user preference, so everyone can get a customized chatbot. The next demo is on semantic caching. The user scenarios are if, let's say, something gets really popular on internet, for example, who win the election of 2024, and there could be a lot of people asking questions in slightly different manner, but really have the same meaning. So in this case, what we want to do is to make sure some responses get cached. So every time when people ask this type of question, it can go to a semantic cache instance, in this case Redis, to and our application can search through how similar are the keys for each response. And if some similar entries found, it can bypass calling OpenAI endpoint and instead just get the response cached in Redis. And that way, it improves the consistency of your application and it does cost saving because hitting the OpenAI endpoint could be expensive. So let's see another demo for it. This is my OpenAI art gallery. It would generate pictures based on the prompt I entered. Let's say semantic cache. This is the endpoint. And let's just say generate a French garden in Monet style. Progress spinning. Okay, so what it did was it hit the DAL-E endpoint in Azure OpenAI and generated a picture based on my prompt. Now, for example, if another ask comes in on a very similar request, let's say a Monet style French garden. Notice how the same picture gets reused and there wasn't any additional call into the backend OpenAI DAL-E deployment. And we can see in the Redis instance, there's one entry gets cached. Basically, we know the prompt. There's a vector embedding format for it to perform the search, and we can reuse the response in the form of a picture URL. Okay, so hear back on the new ideas. Like, what do you think about using Redis for saving chat history? What do you think of integrating semantic caching capabilities into semantic kernel? And general feedback on using Redis in intelligent chat apps. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Catherine. So we'd love to turn over to questions or thoughts people have about the demo. Is there anyone who wants to come off of mute and share, or feel free to put it in chat as well?
I've actually spent the last few weeks looking at alternatives to Azure AI Search for RAG, basically vector storage for RAG. And Redis was on my list. I'm leaning heavily towards anything PaaS in Azure. And I hadn't really appreciated the wealth of options we've got there. I had sort of formulated my initial view based on what was supported in Semantic Kernel, but there are a few other options. And I didn't go too far with Redis, mainly based on the pricing of Redis Enterprise, which is the tier that we would need, I believe, at least in the current state. Is that also true in the new state?
So we are, as much as I can share, we are building more economic skills for Redis Enterprise. So to make our developers to be able to widely adopt the enterprise SKU without paying like a lot of expensive cost upfront. There will be the dev test SKUs, for example, the 1 GB, starting at around $80. That's what we are thinking right now. And there will be more SKUs to come.
Thanks. I mean, I am curious, especially with semantic cache, to look at it in more detail. It'd be super helpful if at some point we had some kind of cross-team comparison of vector storage costs across the Microsoft technologies, right? Like, because there are some pretty difficult to model differences. So as an example, I think the leading free option, which is important to me to be able to just knock up a proof of concept and have somewhere free to do RAG, is actually log analytics. And it is not the most obvious place to stick vectors, but it works. And then you also get a form of hybrid search with KQL. You can do free text hybrid search, basically. And, you know, so is it ideal? No. Does it allow you to mock up something, you know, where what you really want to do is figure out how your engineered prompt is going to work with a RAG solution of some sort? Totally. And, you know, it has tons of problems. You can't delete the data. You know, like it's basically just the CR of CRUD. But anyway, that's been very interesting to me. And then using log analytics ingestion API carries a lot of costs, and they're kind of one-off costs, but they can be significant. So I kept looking, and I've also looked at Azure SQL. And it's, again, not an obvious place to store vectors, but column store indexes do support that. And the costs for Azure SQL are dramatically less than anything else I'm finding. And I've kind of not looked at it too closely, largely because I've had the feeling, rightly or wrongly, that the Semantic Kernel team has treated it as a kind of lesser option. Anyway, I just, it's something that's occupying my attention at the minute for that reason. But to give an idea of the storage costs for Azure SQL, we're looking at £14.75 per month for 250 gigs of storage, which is so much cheaper than what, for instance, we've been paying for 50 gigs of storage in Azure AI Search S2, or S1 with 2 partitions, was costing us, I think, £777 a month, until the recently announced changes there. So this is the kind of thing that's occupying a lot of my attention right now, because I think that not all RAG needs are the same. For instance, something that really needs an indexer, Azure AI Search, I think, remains the best option. But for something that doesn't necessarily need an indexer, particularly for tabular content, I think that there's a lot of other table-based options that can potentially meet our needs. So as I say, the thing that would really help us make this decision the best would be to have some proper cost modeling across all of the technologies. But yeah, the semantic cache as well, potentially that could you know, level out all other cost considerations, right? But I don't know that it will, and it's hard to model.
Yeah, and per Matthew's question in the chat, I have a similar question. Like when you use log analytics or SQL, do you just have to code the cosine distance and the search algorithms yourself, or do you ingest it into OpenAI? Okay.
There is KQL support for cosine similarity queries. It used to be something you'd have to create a function, but they've added native support for it relatively recently. You can do the same thing in Azure Data Explorer. And then in you do have to also create the query in SQL, but you know, it's a pattern that's reasonably easy to follow because it's just some well-known maths.
And you don't have to ingest it into AI search or other similar product.
No. And I mean, the thing for me that is quite interesting about log analytics or Azure Data Explorer is that you have this form of hybrid querying in KQL, where you can do either free text or other, really sophisticated queries in KQL. And that's really familiar to a lot of people and easy to learn. So it has some interesting advantages there, but the cosine function is pretty simple. And the way that I'm handling it at the minute is to do the cosine similarity query, then do just a free text query, bring both sets of results back into the prompt, weight the cosine similarity results higher than the free text ones, but basically ask GPT to figure it out.
Got it. And if you don't mind me asking, like what type of data are you querying, like real time, non-real time? You mentioned tabular, but like would there be any other characteristics of it?
For me, this is best suited for RAG, where you have a stable reference that you need to compare against repeatedly, like a set of exemplars. And then you have a dynamic set of queries that are always changing, but you need to always compare against the same data source. And that, as I say, this is something that that log analytics isn't going to suit all scenarios well, but that's one that it does suit well.
Got it. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
But in Azure Data Explorer, you don't have the same limitations with kind of the immutable nature of log analytics storage. Because in log analytics, you can't delete stuff without actually submitting a support request, and it's highly throttled, things like that. So you're only, sorry, go on, check, Chris.
Yeah, I pasted. You can do it now. There's a preview feature for .update and .delete in log
analytics or in
I pasted a link. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's Kusto. Yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
All good. That's really interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Anyone else? We'd love to be able to hear from you others who have thoughts on this, feedback.
Oh, maybe just one thing, like the example was that we stored the image inside the cache, so image is quite big, and then if we have memory limit 1 gig, then that will be very fast full. Like that somehow worries me.
I see. I think there's a trick in the demo, like the content is the image URL.
Okay.
And I also do output caching on the response tool, so it's really the HTML I'm returning.
Yep, that explains. I thought that we are storing all image there.
Yeah, but I mean, this scenario can be extended. It could be a question and answer, could be image, text response, like any other that fit into your application. The idea is really the key with like similar meanings or semantically similar can be queried and reused.
I have a quick question for the audience. If, like, show of hands, how many of y'all tried implementing semantic caching, whether it's with Redis or otherwise so far? Or is it still kind of a new topic folks haven't touched yet? Okay, so it seems to be on the more newer side.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, just saying, I guess a follow-up, like how many would be interested in using it if we get some support in it?
Okay, I see a fair number of hands. That's great to see. For since it is newer to a lot of folks, are there any other questions around use cases or potentially trying this out? Before we move on to just open Q&A, I want to make sure that everyone has the information that they need as well.
And I guess on the update from the Semantic Kernel side, so Catherine shared the blog. We are also finalizing our updates to Semantic Kernel filters and hooks. My plan is once that's finalized, we can take the work that Catherine's done, wrap it inside of a filter so that you'll be able to add things like semantic caching to a prompt with like 1 or 2 lines of code. So that's something that we want to do to make it easier for y'all to use things like Redis cache in the future.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Catherine, for coming to present. I really appreciate it. And as folks try this out and have other questions, feel free to let us know. We can make sure to get those looped back to Catherine and team. With that, we'll open it up to just open Q&A if there are any other questions. I haven't seen anything else in chat. Feel free to come off of mute or add any questions you may have for the team in chat as well.
Zing.
Hi. Hello. Thank you. So my question is about responsible AI content filtering, about like harmful and jailbreaking issues. So this is kind of like a blocker for our application right now. We have configured the Azure OpenAI content filtering setting to like maximum for our application, like for our deployment. But yeah, so I guess I have a couple of question point. So one is that with the configuration in place, I found that in experiment that if I just like type something like a similar comment where I say like, who is the ugliest people on the team? That kind of thing. Yeah. If I send it directly to Azure OpenAI, I usually get the answer back saying this is not appropriate, stuff like that. But if I use that in our application, which use function stepwise planner to call the kernel to answer the question, I don't know whether it's about that we have like so many more instruction together with the prompt or something. The response is not that consistent as if I just have the question directly into Azure OpenAI's playground, if you know what I mean. So it's like our application might trying to do right really answer the question, like say who is the ugliest on call on the team, and the planner actually will go out to call all the SK function that we have to collect who is on call, which team is on call, and doing all that. I see the log that is doing all this behind the scene, and then it try to say something. So sometimes you'd be able to say like this is not a good question. And sometimes it will come back to say like the on-call is say like John, but he's not ugly. Or sometimes it will just say the on-call is John. And so it just feels like maybe there are like too many information there. So it has some confusion. I don't know. So that's just like a question. I don't know if you guys have any experience with that. And also, I guess another question, the follow-up question is that, I mean, if you have any support and suggestion advice on how to do content filtering with semantic kernel functions and planners.
Great question. So I think your diagnosis is right, because the way the stepwise function calling stepwise planner works is like there's a pretty big prompt and there's like one line where the user's input goes in. And my assumption is there's just so much words, other content that the AI is like, yeah, this is fine. In order to, I guess, fix it, my understanding is the Azure OpenAI safety classification tool does have its own APIs. I don't have it on top of my head, but I believe they exist. And I think this is where semantic kernel filters and hooks come into play. Let me just pull those up real quick. My expectation is you would have a pre-hook once you have the rendered template. Well, actually, even before that, you can have a pre-hook that takes the user's input and run the content safety classification algorithm on just the user input, and that should give you a brighter signal. And at that point, if you do get a positive, you could cancel the rest of the pipeline as part of the function. So let me pull up the samples that we have for hooks, and that should help you get started. Okay. And we're just going to share my screen just to show what's going on. So if we take a look at hooks, we have one for functions and prompts. I believe you could probably use either. But if you use the filter one, there's a pre-event that you can have access to. And as part of the context, there's a, see if I can quickly create this thing real quick.
So where is the function filter used? How is how we incorporate it into our planner calling?
Hold on, 0.
Or we just like create something entirely separately our own?
Yeah, so what you'll end up doing is, why is this not working? SKXP. So here I'm creating a function filter. Let's just delete this stuff right now. We'll comment that out. So what you can do is you would add logic for content safety, etc. And then let's say if true, what you can do is context.cancel equals true, and then that will cancel the invocation of the function. In terms of how do you actually use it, so if we scroll up here, you can see that it's being added as a service to the kernel. So when you build the kernel, it has this filter. You may need to add some logic if you don't want to have this run all the time. So you could say if context.function.name is equal to something, actually perform the logic. And I believe the context also includes the arguments. So you should be able to get the arguments for like whatever the user query is. And then you could send that over, perform the logic for content safety, and then cancel it if it returns back a positive.
Okay, so this hook will be it's something you associated with the planner or the SK function so that it's getting invoked every time a planner is executed.
Yeah, you'll add it to the kernel, and then whenever the planner gets executed, that'll get called.
Okay, so you have an example. I mean, okay, so you send me the example of that. About the Azure OpenAI safety API, do you have any idea?
Yeah, let me look that up. And while I'm looking that up, we can probably grab the next question.
Yeah, sure.
Hi, Dhirendra here. I want to ask, like, this semantic kernel connectors.redis packages, right? Or other packages which are still in the alpha version. Will there be any RC candidate packages will be available soon?
Yeah, great question. So as we approach build, we're trying to make as many things non-experimental as possible. What we are currently prioritizing are filters or hooks. We just talked about those. So those are going to get one last round of changes before we lock those. We have some content types like images and video that we would like to make non-experimental. And then agents and memory. So I think most of our like alpha and beta packages are memory connectors. We are planning on taking a few of those and making them non-experimental by build. There will still be quite a few things that will still be in like a experimental state. Those include any of the out-of-the-box plugins. Our planners will likely still be experimental. And there's a few other things that I'm having a difficult time recollecting, but I'd say about a third to a half of them should be non-experimental by the time build rolls around.
So any ETA for it, like?
By Microsoft build is our plan to get those in, which is
So yeah,
in
by
May.
May 21st. Yep.
Oh, May 21st. Got it.
Great. I'm not seeing any other questions in chat. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to come off of mute and dive into, or in chat? Would love to hear other questions people have.
Yeah, hi, Pradeep here. A question I had was on the agents. I know the current implementation is closely associated with the Assistant API of OpenAI. There were plans to sort of decouple that and bring out a new version. Could you share the plans for that?
Yeah. So we're getting closer. So we do have a open PR right here, and I'll share in the chat. We're starting to bring in the new abstractions into Semantic Kernel. You can kind of start checking out the different files that were changed. I think the biggest things that are changing inside of the initial experimental package, we just introduced an agent, which, as you correctly called out, is very closely tied to the Assistance API. What we did as part of our next rev is we are taking some inspiration from AutoGen. So not only are we introducing an agent abstraction, we're also introducing an abstraction that allows agents to talk to each other as part of a chat. So we're calling this agent chat right now. And then together, this allows you to, I think we have some samples that are being created. A few samples where you can go ahead and create an agent, add it to a chat, and then start asking the chat some questions. So if you have any feedback for us, definitely leave it in the PR. We'd love to hear it. There's definitely a few more revs that we need to make to this before it is fully baked.
Okay. And can we expect this as part of 1.8 or?
That's a good question. So it'll be inside of the main branch by 1.8. We're still debating if we create a NuGet package for these things, because we do know of quite a few things that we want to change. So it might be shortly after that, before it's in an actual NuGet package.
Okay, and that would be like a month out or any rough?
Yeah, we've been doing NuGet updates 1 to 2 every week or every 2 weeks. So I'd expect to be less than a month before this is out for folks to test.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have a follow-up question related to that. So what is the intention behind the agents implementation? Is it to be more integrated with AutoGen, or would it be more of like a competitor?
Yeah. So in Python, kind of our story is AutoGen they classify themselves as a research project, and they don't encourage folks to put it in production unless you know what you're doing. The goal with Semantic Kernel in Python is basically provide an enterprise version of AutoGen that you could more confidently roll out to production. So that's in Python space. In .NET, because there isn't yet a AutoGen.NET version, we're using this opportunity to try to align on some of the base abstractions. So there is an AutoGen.NET project that is actively in flight, and we are working with that team to see if we can use the same interfaces and classes so that these two projects just seamlessly work together. So that you as a developer don't have to necessarily choose between one or the other. They just work together. In terms of how you should think about them being different, the way I see it is Semantic Kernel is going to provide those base abstractions for like, this is an agent and this is kind of a group chat. A lot of the value that the AutoGen team in particular is driving is what are the best patterns for agents to work together and using research to back up which patterns are actually best. And so what I expect with that package is a bunch of different collaboration methods for agents. And what we'll do in Semantic Kernels, we'll pick the ones that they've identified as being the best so that you can use it in enterprise scenarios.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Great. And I'm seeing a number of questions in chat. So I'm going to start from the oldest. Patrick has a question of, do you have any examples of shared data between agents with a given session? So structured data within that, not just chat, allowing agents to collaborate on a notebook of structured data.
I guess, do you mind coming off mute to expand on it a bit more? The reason I ask is, like, right now, agents are really just like a abstraction around the LLM. So at the end of the day, it always has to be some sort of like chat message that has to go in. And so I'm curious if you had ideas on what you mean by structured data.
Yeah. So for example, there's another Microsoft library that talks about using TypeScript types as a way of kind of being able to force a output of a agent to result in like a particular TypeScript type. And that way it can kind of structure the output into a TypeScript type, and that way other agents can then consume that. But what I'm thinking is maybe more helpful is if an agent, as it's working on something, let's say you have one agent that's saying, hey, I need to get like you ask a collection of agents, like, hey, I want to send an email out for a particular set of users and have this particular message. And it might need to query to get the email addresses from one agent will get the list of users and give an array of emails. And another agent might say, hey, I need a subject and a body and a list of users. So the output of one would feed into the other, but if they could collaborate in a structured spot where it's like, hey, I'll fill in this data into like a notebook of sorts. And I'm talking not like a Python notebook. I'm just talking like a conceptual, like, hey, we're collaborating on a document that can contain structured data that they can, reference and say, oh, here's that list of users. I'll put that into the to list of the email, because the other agent needs a to list, a subject, and a body, but it's not going to be able to get the to list. One agent will get you the to list as an array of email addresses. So if they could have a place rather than just, hey, I'm just spewing this information into a chat and the other one pulls it out of the chat. Having a chat as the way of kind of collaborating structured data isn't usually I wouldn't imagine that's the most effective way, especially as you get into agents that need structured data as an input.
Yeah. Okay. So, this makes way more sense. So, the way we have been working on this internally, we have this concept called like a whiteboard, which is like the shared space that these agents can all kind of collaborate in, which sounds very similar to what you're describing. And I like to think of it similar to us as humans. Like, we're in a chat together, but we also use applications like Excel to like store information, and we can look at it and kind of put in information if we're the inputters, and maybe an analyst like pulls it out, right? That sounds very similar to kind of what you're describing. Now, the next question is like, okay, if we have this separate application like Excel or this whiteboard application, how do we actually allow the agents to interact with it? And to your point, all these applications expect structured input and provide structured output, right? This is where function calling really starts to shine, because you can imagine I stand up this Excel-like application that has all these like required fields. I want to give one agent the tools to input that information. And I think you're mentioning type chat, where you can like describe an object using metadata and properties so that it's semantically understood. Semantic kernel does the same thing with our attributes for functions, right? So you can describe, hey, this is the function, these are the inputs, this is the type of the input and the descriptions for all the different fields. We'll take all the information, give it to the LLM, so it now knows, oh, for me to put in the required information, for you, it's the subject line and to field, I have to call this function, and I can go ahead and drop it in. You can then give another agent a function, a tool that retrieves that information, and it will provide a JSON body back with the correct response, right? So that's our strategy for kind of facilitating this. The one other thing I would add is part of our initial prototyping with agents. We imagine that the instructions themselves can be parameterized. So a good example of this is you might have a customer support agent, but you really wanted to specialize on each individual product. You're not going to create 100 different agents for each product, right? Instead, you can templatize the agent, and maybe inside of it, you would expect the product ID, right? And so now whenever another agent calls it, we tell the agent through function calling, hey, in order to call this agent, don't just send a chat message. You also have to give the ID of the product, right? So that's another way we're trying to introduce this structured information inside of our agent framework so that you get a little bit more productive or predictable results for your application.
Just going back to the, maybe I'm missing the concept. I'll have to dig through things a little bit deeper, but the concept of like that whiteboard or where they can the agents can collaborate on something, is that more in code as you're developing the agents, or is that a first class property of the semantic framework? Because I don't recall coming across that.
That would be more like a custom implementation. Because Semantic Kernel, we're just kind of like a framework on the SDK side. We kind of stop before you build a custom application that the agent like talks to. I do think we probably need a sample demonstrating this. I know Sophia, she's working on a sample where the agents use Microsoft Graph APIs to like make bookings reservations. To me, that's similar enough. Like you can imagine one agent sending the required information to bookings service to go, oh, this is the number of people, this is the time the dinner reservation is, and you can imagine another agent given tools to retrieve that information. But really, you're just creating functions that talk to this application that you have floating as another service.
And is there a like a common like an ID, like a thread or something, so that way these agents, when they're collaborating on something, like you can say that, hey, Matthew, you're having a conversation. Sophia, you're having another one. We're keeping what your agents are working on separately in separate sessions, I guess.
Yeah. So that was probably the biggest drawback of our previous implementation of our agent framework, is because we didn't provide a really great way of managing these threads. So what we are doing with our latest rev is, I think I mentioned this, we're duplicating or recreating the group chat concept that's inside of Autogen today. This basically is the object that you get to instantiate and say, hey, this is the conversation thread for you and I. I'm going to create another one for these other sets of agents, and that's how you'll be able to keep these two things separate.
And can you just kind of query that and say, hey, is there a thread ID that way, if you're collaborating in the background in the where I'm saying like, hey, I want these agents to work on this whiteboard. Can I say, okay, hey, when I'm reading and writing from this whiteboard, I'm accessing it by its thread ID. So that way, Matthew, the agents that are collaborating in that whiteboard for you aren't going to get jumbled up with Sophia's.
That is a good question. I don't think we have that, because that would require like some sort of ID parameter on this agent chat concept, which I don't see. So I'll bring this requirement to the team. I think that's a good one. Basically, you want to be able to have some sort of identifier on this agent chat so that other systems can know, oh, this whiteboard is attached to this group chat, right? Similar to how like in Teams right now, I could maybe I can't pin a particular application, and that's like a view just for our meeting and not for other meetings. That makes complete sense. Yeah, let me bring that back to the team.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Patrick. I'm seeing two other questions in chat. We'll start with Deepinder. Would you mind coming off mute to elaborate a bit more on the GitHub issue that you have linked as well? I'd love to hear more.
Hi, so we have been prototyping with Semantic Kernel for a few months now, and are at the stage where we are starting to define the actual requirements for our product. And one of the things we've been thinking of providing is a store of prompts, of well-defined prompts, with function calling included in there, so that when a user asks us for a request, which is similar to a prompt we have, we can retrieve that prompt and then guide the language model to process the current user question in a similar manner. It is not going to be a one-to-one match, but it will be a good example for it to handle the current user request. So for that, we need function calling as part of the examples we provide. And based on my Discord conversation, I think with Matthew a few months ago, there were some issues in Azure that was preventing this from happening. So I don't know what the status is on, it seems to have fallen through the cracks or something. So just wanted to get an update on that.
Yes, so I actually have a good update on that one. Okay, so go ahead and share my screen. This is the issue you created. We need to tie this issue to the work that's being done, but we're tackling as part of this broader issue right here, which is to introduce a new function call content type. And one of the requirements that we specified, I'm calling it simulated function calls, but basically, as a developer, you should be able to add tool calls and tool responses as part of a chat history so that you can do these few shot examples within your AI system. So this has been in flight for a couple weeks now. Sergey, who's the primary developer on this right now, he does have a PR where he's adding the support. I'll drop that in the chat. I would expect there's another week or two before this is complete. But once it is, your issue should be resolved. So yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And then I guess my ask for you is we do have a ADR where we're discussing the solution. And we have a few different options. I believe we've chosen actually, I'm not sure which one we've chosen, but you might want to give this a review and take a look at section 4. This is where we're discussing your particular scenario.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
Post a link there.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Zing, I think you are also needing this for your scenarios.
Yeah.
And someone today so I am also excited for this to come in.
So you're saying this is going to be available soon?
Yes. At Sergey's current velocity, I would expect at least within 2 weeks it should be in, if not sooner.
Okay.
Cool.
Great. And with the remainder of time, I see a question in chat and a hand. I'm going to go for the question in chat first, and we'll come back to the hand to wrap up today's session. Jeffrey, would you mind coming up with you? You have some really good points here. I'd love to hear a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah. So one thing we're looking at is just AI agent observability, and Semantic Kernel already has some good functionality for being able to get open telemetry style logging data. And one thing I'm interested in is just testing out using that information to get observability on how our agents are performing. And so one thing I'm looking at is Langsmith. And Langsmith has an API that can kind of accept very similar they call them runs, but they're basically open telemetry spans. And so I'd like to try to get my Semantic Kernel spans into Langsmith. And there's kind of two approaches there. There's filters, and then there's also the hooks. And so I'm trying to get some clarity on, when should I use one or other, or is one less now and the other's not?
Yeah. So if you're in .NET, we are deprecating hooks in favor of filters. So hopefully that makes that decision a little bit easier. We do have another rev of filters coming over the next week or two, so just expect that to land. It might influence some changes. In the topic of open telemetry in particular, there's been a consortium formed between Microsoft and a few other tech companies on how do we standardize open telemetry traces and spans for AI applications. Semantic Kernel will be adopting those recommendations or the specifications. So by build, you should also expect just generally better telemetry within Semantic Kernel.
Okay.
Out
Is
of the
there
box.
someone I can find additional information on that consortium? Just have an idea of like what that specification might look like.
Yeah, I'm going to try pulling this up. And if someone, yeah, so I'm going to pull up there. I believe there's like a PR floating around of what the draft spec is. So I'm going to try to get that pulled up and share in the chat. If the next person wants to come off mute and start asking their question, though, we can do that.
Yeah, definitely. Apologies if I mispronounced this. Srini Vasan?
Yeah, Sophia, you can call me Sai. Yeah, probably next time I'll join as Sai. All right, cool. Very quick troubleshoot. Matthew, I don't know if you have some time there, but if that's okay, probably I'll just quickly do a screen share if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right. Okay. So it should be pretty straightforward. So the thing is, I'm trying to write a custom plugin and try to load it within the stepwise planner. So this is my custom plugin. And I wanted to get it loaded. I'm kind of relatively new. I'm trying to keep my hands on as I get time. So what would be the best possibility to load this plugin?
What is it? Ask the final question again.
Yeah, so I wanted to load this plugin. So I don't know how to do it. So these are some of the core plugins which I'm using from the sample. Already have. Now I've written a custom plugin. That is something which I wanted to load it as part of the stepwise planner.
Yeah, this looks right. Can you scroll it to your custom plugin?
Okay, so this is my custom plugin.
Okay. This looks generally correct. Are you receiving an error or something? I'm assuming.
Right. So this one is loaded from the. I think this is a file name, I suppose, and this is the class name. So here, since I'm loading directly from the notebook, so given the class name here, what should be the component here? I mean, the parameter.
Oh, so that's the name of the plugin that you give the AI. So you probably want to call it like Unily search.
Okay. So
the AI would then go, oh, yeah.
Okay. So okay. I think this has got loaded. Okay. I'm kind of running out of time here.
But this generally looks correct. So yeah, you should be good. Yeah.
Okay, let me take a look and.
Great.
All right.
If you have any
Cool.
further
Thanks.
questions, feel free to reach out in the next office hours or also in GitHub discussions as well. Want to thank everyone for the time today. Really appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Thank
Thanks
you.
all.
Just, but